3 ingredients on the counter, and 6 mouths to feed. That was Tuesday night in half the kitchens across America, and nobody complained because the food was hot and the pot was full. Your grandmother didn't need a recipe. She needed a can of beans, a scoop of flour, and the bacon grease she kept in a jar by the stove. That's how families ate when a single paycheck had to stretch from rent day to rent day. And somehow those 3-ingredient suppers held up better than most of what lines the freezer aisle today. Wait until number 52. Nothing but cornmeal, water, and grease, and people still fight over whose grandma made it best. And number 11? 1 pound of hamburger stretched into a casserole that fed a family of 8. These weren't shortcuts. They were suppers that kept people going when nothing else would. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 60 cheap 3-ingredient suppers our grandparents made when money was tight. Number 17. Cornbread in buttermilk. You crumbled leftover cornbread into a tall glass, poured cold buttermilk over it, and ate it with a spoon. In the South, this was not strange. This was supper. Farmers ate it after a day in the field. Grandmothers ate it before bed. Seniors living alone ate it whenever the kitchen felt too hot to turn on the stove. The cornbread was already made. The buttermilk was already cold. The whole thing came together in less than a minute, and the tartness of the buttermilk against the crumbly sweetness of the cornbread was a flavor that tasted like every back porch in the rural South from the 1930s through the 1970s. A box of cornmeal cost 39 cents in 1975. Buttermilk was 45 cents a quart. A single batch of cornbread made in a cast-iron skillet could feed a person for 3 or 4 days, and the buttermilk kept it from going dry. Your grandfather did not need a recipe for this. He needed a glass. Number 15. Ham bone and navy beans. 1 leftover ham bone, 1 bag of dried navy beans, water. That was the entire recipe, and it fed more church basements than any roast or casserole ever did. The ham bone was free. It was already paid for with Easter dinner or Christmas supper. The navy beans cost 69 cents a bag in 1990 and produced enough soup to serve 20 people. You dropped the bone into a pot on Saturday afternoon, added the soaked beans and water, and let it simmer until Sunday morning. By the time the congregation walked out of the sanctuary, the fellowship hall smelled like someone's grandmother had been cooking all night, because someone had. Baptist churches in rural Georgia kept a rotation of women who each took a turn with the ham bone. One family's Easter ham became the next Sunday's church supper. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was thrown away. The bone passed from kitchen to kitchen like a shared hymnal, and every pot it touched tasted like the one before it. Coffee grounds have been around almost as long as the beloved brew itself. Originating in the Ethiopian highlands, coffee made its way to Europe by the 17th century, and soon the grounds became more than just waste. In households across America, coffee grounds were repurposed in ways that might surprise today's coffee snobs. Before espresso shots were a thing, the humble grounds found a new life in kitchens, gardens, and even beauty routines. In cooking, coffee grounds became an unexpected flavor enhancer. They work wonders as a rub for meats, especially beef and pork, adding a rich, earthy depth. The bitterness of the coffee is balanced with sweetness in desserts, where they can be incorporated into brownies, ice cream, or cakes. It's a trick that gives a sophisticated edge to otherwise simple recipes. For the frugal, repurposing coffee grounds was essential. No sense in tossing something so useful, especially when it had benefits beyond flavor. From pest control in gardens to deodorizing shoes, coffee grounds were an all-in-one tool. Health-wise, coffee grounds are packed with antioxidants, which are known to help with inflammation. They're also a source of potassium and magnesium, essential minerals for the body. Number 11. Tomato sandwich. White bread. A thick slice of ripe tomato, a little salt and pepper. In the South, this was a summer ritual. Families waited all year for the tomatoes to come in, and when they did, you did not waste them on a complicated recipe. You sliced them, put them on bread, salted them, and ate them standing at the kitchen counter. A tomato from the garden cost nothing. The bread cost pennies. In 1948, the average American household grew at least some of its own food. In rural communities, a good tomato was treated with the same respect you would give a piece of meat. The sandwich was simple enough that a child could make it. It tasted like summer itself. For families who had spent the winter on canned vegetables and dried beans, that first tomato sandwich was proof that better days were coming. Homemade Lara bars are one of the best things to go for if you're aching for a bit more caramel in your life or day. They actually end up using cocoa powder for a chocolatey note, but the main flavor profile here is definitely the dates and almonds working together to create a unique caramel flavor. The star of the show is the dynamic between the almonds and the dates, because while one gives you an insane nuttiness, the other gives you this lovely backdrop with its textures and flavors that help tie the dish together. All of that gets amplified when you mix in the bittersweet cocoa powder. And that's what makes Lara bars such an addictive snack capable of satisfying even the harshest of sweet tooths. Of course, a dessert doesn't exactly have to be unhealthy either. And dishes like this continue to prove that just because you like things on the sweeter side doesn't mean you have to trade away your health for it. You can definitely have both, and people have been living happily that way for so much longer than we can ever realize. If you ever feel like indulging in your sweet tooth in some health-conscious ways, try this recipe out. Number 12. Split pea soup with ham hock. This is the one boarders argued over for the last helping, the dish we promised you back at the start. After a ham had been picked clean, the bone never went in the trash. It went straight into a tall pot with a sack of dried split peas, an onion, and whatever bits of meat still clung to the bone. Then it simmered all day on the back of the stove while the landlady tended to everything else. By supper, the peas had melted into a thick green puree you could nearly stand a spoon in, rich with smoke from the hock. A nickel bag of dried peas and a bone nobody else wanted fed a house full of laborers who needed a meal that burned slow through long hours of cold outdoor work. The steel men and the dock workers ran on bowls like this. It cost almost nothing and warmed a body to the bone. Split pea soup with ham hock turned the last scrap of a ham into the meal everyone fought to finish. Number 11. The Saturday night common table supper. Of every meal that came out of a boarding house kitchen, this was the one the whole week pointed toward. Saturday was the night the landlady went a little further because Sunday meant church and rest, and the boarders had been paid. She had spent the week stretching scraps into hash and gravy, but on Saturday a cheaper roast went into the oven in the late afternoon, surrounded by potatoes and carrots and onions that soaked up the drippings as it cooked. The smell of it crept up the stairs and pulled tired men down to the dining room early, hats in hand, waiting at the long table before the platter even arrived. When it did, the landlady carved it thin so it would reach every plate, and not a soul complained about the size of his slice, because the gravy and the bread filled in the rest. Around that table sat a mill hand, a young clerk far from home, a widower with no kitchen of his own, and a traveling salesman passing through. They were strangers on Monday. By Saturday, passing the potatoes hand to hand under one lamp, they had become something closer to a family, at least for the length of a meal. The landlady ate last, if she ate at all, watching the platters empty and counting in her head what Sunday's leftovers would have to cover. That roast became cold sandwiches, then soup, then a hash, until the bone itself went into a pot. Nothing about the supper was fancy, and that was the whole point. It was warm. It was generous in spirit, if not in portion. And for a room full of people with nowhere else to be, it was the closest thing to home that money could rent. The Saturday common table supper fed the body cheaply and the loneliness even more cheaply, and that was the real magic of the boarding house. Mashed banana and mayo sandwiches might sound strange to modern ears, but back in the day, this sweet and tangy sandwich was a Southern staple that showed up in plenty of lunchboxes. You mashed up a ripe banana, spread it on soft sandwich bread, and added a swipe of mayonnaise. That was it. It was quick, cheap, and surprisingly filling. Families leaned on recipes like this when groceries were scarce and meals had to stretch. The banana added sweetness, the mayo gave it creaminess, and together they turned plain bread into a fast, satisfying lunch. You would find this sandwich scribbled in old community cookbooks, passed down at church picnics, or tucked into handwritten recipe boxes that lived in kitchen drawers. It might be forgotten now, but for plenty of folks growing up during hard times, This odd little sandwich was a reliable 10-minute fix when money was tight and hunger was knocking. Canned ravioli was the Italian dinner that came in a can and never asked for praise. You popped open the metal lid, poured the heavy red sauce into a pot or a bowl, and microwaved it until it bubbled around the edges. The smell was artificial, the sauce too sweet, and the ravioli too soft, but none of that mattered, because it was food. And sometimes that was the only requirement. Chef Boyardee was not a chef in your kitchen, he was a lifeline, a shortcut to something that felt like a meal even if it came from a shelf instead of a stove. You ate it straight from the bowl, sometimes with a slice of bread to soak up the sauce. Other times, just a fork and a quick prayer that no one noticed how many nights in a row you were eating the same thing. The meat inside the pasta was more memory than substance, a whisper of protein in a sea of tomato. But it was hot, and it was filling, and it kept the stomach quiet when the cupboards were mostly bare. You were not proud of it, but you were grateful, because for $1 or less, it gave you something to hold on to. Number 23, dried corn soup. After the last ears of summer corn came off the stalks, women across the hill country of Pennsylvania and West Virginia cut the kernels thin and laid them out to dry on old window screens set in the sun. By October, the kernels had shriveled to hard, pale chips with a concentrated sweetness that fresh corn never had. Come November, a handful went into a pot of water with a piece of side meat, an onion, and nothing else. The pot simmered all afternoon while your grandmother worked at something else. By supper, the dried kernels had swollen back up and turned the broth milky and thick. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, among Mennonite and Pennsylvania Dutch families, this was called dried corn soup, and it appeared every winter without fail. The flavor was not like canned corn. It was deeper, almost nutty, the way something tastes when summer has been cooked down to its most honest form. One pot. No stove skill required beyond patience. The women who made it were alive to the fact that summer did not last. They made it last anyway. If you thought that meatloaf was the most divided dish, let me present to you its distant relative, liver loaf. This dish was the answer to the question, what do we do with all this liver, of the 1950s? Spoiler, they shaped it into a solid loaf and then proceeded to smother it in thick brown sauce. It was the epitome of the all-in-one meal that sought to get as much nutrition as possible and then some out of a piece of offal. The ingredients were basic, but not plain at all. The liver was raw and minced and mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and only a pinch of spices to cover the raw smell of the liver. Baked to a golden brown, it resembled a meatloaf, but when it came out of the oven, it smelled like liver. The gravy was mandatory. Its richness was meant to complement or mask the assertiveness of the loaf. The liver loaf had its followers, especially children who grew up during the Depression and the Second World War, when organ meats were cheap and rich in iron. But it also had its critics, usually young members of the family frowning at the table while Grandpa was telling stories about the great past. Today, the liver loaf is considered to be a kind of gastronomic antique. It may not sit on the modern Sunday table, but it is a perfect example of innovative and frugal cuisine. Who knows? Perhaps it is time for a return to the 80s. Number 24, scalloped potatoes. 3 potatoes, a cup of milk, a tablespoon of butter, sliced thin, layered in a dish, and baked until the edges turned golden and the center went soft and creamy. That was the entire recipe that appeared in a 1947 Methodist Ladies' Aid cookbook from Ames, Iowa. No cheese, no onion, no seasoning beyond salt. The milk and butter did all the work, turning raw potatoes into something that tasted the way a warm kitchen feels on a January evening. A 10-pound bag of potatoes cost 53 cents in 1950. One bag made enough scalloped potatoes to fill 3 church pans. Women like Darlene Hatcher in Des Moines made this every third Sunday for the covered dish table and never once heard a complaint. Your grandmother did not need a recipe card. She needed a knife, a pan, and enough patience to let the oven do the rest. The pan came home empty every time. Born from the byproduct of sugarcane processing, molasses was once considered a humble leftover, until people discovered its remarkable potential. Its use dates back thousands of years, with early records from ancient India and the Mediterranean. By the 18th century, molasses was a cornerstone of the colonial economy, fueling everything from rum production to baked goods. Even the infamous Boston molasses disaster of 1919, a flood of 2 million gallons, reminds us just how embedded it was in everyday life. Its robust, almost smoky flavor transforms gingerbread, baked beans, and barbecue sauces into unforgettable dishes. While white sugar provides sweetness, molasses delivers depth, a quality modern sweeteners simply can't replicate. That's why so many of Grandma's recipes taste richer than today's shortcuts allow. In frugal households, molasses was a pantry superstar. Cheaper than refined sugar, it stretched far and worked double duty, flavoring everything from cakes to porridge. During the Civil War, it even became a stand-in sweetener when sugar shortages struck. Nutritionally, molasses offers more than empty calories. Blackstrap molasses, in particular, is rich in iron, calcium, and potassium. No wonder it was often touted as a health tonic. Number 19. Milk toast. If you ever got sick as a child, your grandmother may have made this when somebody was old or when there was almost nothing left in the kitchen. Stale bread or toast, warm milk poured over the top, a little sugar or a pinch of salt, depending on the family. In the 1940s, whenever a child stayed home from school with a fever, this was what appeared on the bedside table. It was soft enough for toddlers and gentle enough for elderly people who had lost their teeth. Milk toast showed up in American kitchens as far back as the 1800s, and by the Depression, it had become the unofficial meal of last resort. It cost a few pennies. It required no cooking skill whatsoever, and it carried a strange kind of comfort that had nothing to do with flavor and everything to do with being taken care of. This one's a bit of a fancier dish, so I wouldn't blame you if you skipped past because the theme so far is some pretty easy food that you can make anytime. But fancy doesn't mean complicated, and there's nothing complex about this goat cheese olive tapenade sandwich. All you need is sourdough bread, or really any kind. It's up to your preference, goat's cheese, and an olive tapenade, and you have yourself a delicious little sub that you can enjoy easily to fill up the tank. This dish has some Mediterranean influences because in that cuisine, not all sandwiches typically always involve meat. A lot of them are simple ones that use a few ingredients like this, but the satisfying crunch and the sourness of the olive tapenade with the sweetness of the goat's cheese make for such a compelling bite. It kind of made me wish Subway would start doing tapenades too, but it's good to have your own collection of homemade sandwiches different from what you get from your favorite takeout spots. Number 18. Stewed tomatoes over bread. Here is a supper that turned almost nothing into a warm, filling plate. Canned or fresh tomatoes were simmered down with a little onion, thickened with flour, and sweetened just a touch. Then tossed with torn squares of day-old bread until the bread soaked up every bit of the juice. Some cooks baked it like a savory pudding. Others spooned it hot over mashed potatoes, rice, or grits. Either way, it stretched a few tomatoes and the heel of a loaf into a dish that fed the whole table for pennies. It used up stale bread that would otherwise have gone to waste, which mattered when every crumb was counted. The taste was sweet, tangy, and comforting on a cold evening. Younger folks today have never even heard of it. Stewed tomatoes over bread was poverty cooking at its most clever, and it never let anyone leave the table hungry. Number 17. Biscuits and chocolate gravy. Self-rising flour, shortening, and buttermilk for the biscuits. Cocoa powder, sugar, and milk for the gravy. Technically 6 ingredients across 2 components, but the church ladies of the Ozarks counted it as 3 because they considered biscuits a given, not an ingredient. The gravy was the recipe. Cocoa, sugar, milk, whisked in a cast iron skillet over medium heat until it thickened into a dark, sweet, silky sauce that you poured over split biscuits and ate with your fingers. In Appalachian churches from eastern Kentucky to the hollows of West Virginia, this was the dessert that ended every potluck from October to March. Children lined up for it. Grown men took seconds. A box of Hershey's cocoa cost 35 cents in 1958 and made enough gravy for 20 biscuits. That was dessert for the entire congregation at a cost your pocket change could cover. The women who made it measured with their hands and 40 years of memory that no cookbook could teach. Number 8. Skillet Spam Hash. Hormel started canning Spam in 1937 in Austin, Minnesota, and by 1944 the company was shipping 15 million cans a week to American troops in the Pacific. When the boys came home, they wanted the taste of the chow line on a Saturday night, and their mothers and young wives obliged. Dice a half can of Spam into rough cubes on the wooden board, brown them hard in her iron pan until the edges caramelized and the kitchen smelled like the inside of a mess tent. Add a chopped cold boiled potato. Add a yellow onion diced fine. Press the hash flat. Let it crust on the bottom for 4 minutes without touching it. Flip the slab once. Crust the other side. Crack 2 eggs right onto the top. Lid on, 3 minutes. Hawaiian grandmothers cooked the same hash on Sundays after church and called it home. Number 17. Hoover Stew. Named bitterly after President Herbert Hoover, who left office in 1933 with bread lines stretching around city blocks, Hoover Stew lived on in American kitchens for 30 more years after the Depression officially ended. Macaroni noodles, sliced hot dogs, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a can of corn. All in one pot. Boil the macaroni, add the rest, let it simmer until the tomatoes had soaked into the pasta. In shantytown communities called Hoovervilles during the 1930s, this exact formula fed hundreds out of community pots. By the 1960s, it had moved, generation by generation, into the kitchens of working-class families in Cleveland and Detroit and Gary, Indiana, where it was just called mac and hot dogs. A package of macaroni was 19 cents in 1965. A can of tomatoes was 15 cents. 4 hot dogs stretched to feed 5 people. That was dinner for under 50 cents. The name Hoover had long since been forgotten. The meal hadn't. Yes, pork cake is as literal as it gets and as strange as it sounds. No, it's not a dessert. Imagine meatloaf and fruitcake got together and decided to create something truly unforgettable. A rich, meaty bread containing pork and spices, slightly sweet. Pork cake was a Sunday dinner in the South, the sort of dish that made your neighbors look at you funny and your relatives beg for the recipe. The name was as unusual as the ingredients used in preparing the food. In a bowl, ground pork was combined with breadcrumbs, eggs, and spices such as cloves and nutmeg. Some recipes even contained a hint of molasses or brown sugar to give an extra hint of sweetness to the savory. The loaf was baked until firm and then sliced and served with gravy, or for the more adventurous, a side order of applesauce. You must be wondering why anyone would go to the trouble of making a pork cake. Well, it was a good means of extending meat since one could only afford a small piece of meat, but had enough beans to make it go around. Besides, it was very spicy, which was quite different from the usual meatloaf that I am used to eating. It was filling, surprising, and, to be quite frank, peculiar, but peculiar in a good sort of way. Today, pork cake has nearly vanished from tables, but remains in the recipe books of those who enjoy retro foods. Whether you like it or not, it is a piece of history that needs to be discussed when it comes to our culinary world, or at least for the controversy it brings. Onion soup mix, that beloved kitchen shortcut, was introduced in the 1950s by companies like Lipton, tapping into the growing demand for quick and easy meal solutions. With its combination of dried onions, seasonings, and savory flavors, it quickly became a pantry essential, transforming dishes with minimal effort. The mix was originally marketed for French onion soup, but home cooks soon realized it had a multitude of uses, from dips to casseroles and even as a seasoning for meats. In terms of flavor, onion soup mix packs a punch. Its robust, savory profile can enhance everything from simple roasts to baked casseroles. When added to dips, it gives them that irresistible umami kick. The mix works its magic by infusing dishes with deep, oniony goodness, without needing fresh onions or hours of chopping. In an era of busy households, onion soup mix was a frugal hero. It made meals easier and more affordable, offering a way to elevate simple ingredients into something special. A single packet could transform a plain dish into something with flavor and depth, making it an indispensable tool for home cooks. It's a shortcut that home cooks, especially in middle-class America, continue to rely on for fast, flavorful meals. Number 22. Pinto beans and cornbread. If you grew up in the mountains of West Virginia, you already know this one. Church ladies made it every Wednesday for decades. A pot of dry pinto beans, a ham bone saved from Sunday, a skillet of cornbread made from cornmeal, water, and a little grease. The beans simmered all day on a wood stove, and by evening they were thick and rich and tasted like they had 10 ingredients instead of 2. A pound of dry pintos cost around 9 cents in 1938. The ham bone was free because nobody else wanted it. You crumbled the cornbread into the beans and ate it with a spoon. Families in eastern Kentucky, southwest Virginia, and all through the hollows of Appalachia ate this combination 3 or 4 nights a week. It was not a side dish, it was the whole meal. And for a lot of people, it was enough. Continuing the protein train, if you find yourself keeping the workout part of things on lockdown but not being able to manage the diet part of things, I got a protein skillet with chickpeas and eggs with your name on it. This one makes use of 3 simple things: chickpeas, eggs, and spinach. And it's just as good as it sounds. This is like a natural-born steroid, the kind of thing to send your muscles into high gear immediately and get you meeting those protein requirements without any of the prep work. Don't feel like whipping up a fillet of grilled chicken with mashed potatoes and prepping your meals a night in advance? Don't feel like subjecting yourself to scoops of protein powder? Get ripped the natural way and have the benefit of a superfood all in one. This is one of the most refreshing skillets I could recommend. And honestly, it's one of the best post-workout meals too. Plus, expanding your horizons past just meat as a source of protein helps a lot. You get to take in different benefits of all kinds of foods while you also get what you originally wanted in your diet. Sometimes a cut of steak is what you need, but sometimes it wouldn't hurt to try some peas and beans. Number 15. Stewed prunes. To modern ears, this sounds more like medicine than dessert, but on a boarding house table it was the sweet, gentle finish to a heavy meal. Drying plums was a cheap way to keep summer fruit through the long, cold months, so a sack of prunes sat in nearly every pantry. The cook soaked them, then simmered them slow in a little water with sugar until they swelled up soft and syrupy. Spooned warm into a bowl, sometimes with a splash of cream, they cost next to nothing and rounded off supper with something sweet. They turned up at breakfast too, beside the oatmeal, doing double duty the way every thrifty food did. For a generation that grew up before refrigerators, this was simply what dessert tasted like. Younger people today wrinkle their noses at the very idea. Stewed prunes were humble comfort, and they sweetened more hard winters than anyone bothered to count. Number 15. Ham bone and navy beans. 1 leftover ham bone, 1 bag of dried navy beans, water. That was the entire recipe, and it fed more church basements than any roast or casserole ever did. The ham bone was free. It was already paid for with Easter dinner or Christmas supper. The navy beans cost 69 cents a bag in 1990 and produced enough soup to serve 20 people. You dropped the bone into a pot on Saturday afternoon, added the soaked beans and water, and let it simmer until Sunday morning. By the time the congregation walked out of the sanctuary, the fellowship hall smelled like someone's grandmother had been cooking all night, because someone had. Baptist churches in rural Georgia kept a rotation of women who each took a turn with the ham bone. One family's Easter ham became the next Sunday's church supper. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was thrown away. The bone passed from kitchen to kitchen like a shared hymnal, and every pot it touched tasted like the one before it. Number 5. Corned beef hash. The dish came out of New England Irish kitchens in the 19th century as a way to use up the boiled corned beef and cabbage from a Sunday dinner. By the 1860s, a cheap restaurant in America was called a hash house, and the cooks behind the counter were hash slingers. Wartime rationing in the early 1940s pushed canned corned beef into every grocery shelf, and grandmothers in Boston, Providence, and Hartford turned it into a one-pan Tuesday supper. Dice the meat, dice a cold boiled potato, dice an onion. Brown the whole pile hard in her iron pan until a dark crust formed on the bottom. Crack 2 eggs right onto the top and lid the pan for 3 minutes. The yolks broke when you cut into the hash, and that was the sauce. Number 16. Hamburger gravy over rice. A quarter pound of ground beef, browned in the skillet with a diced onion until it broke into crumbles. A spoonful of flour stirred in to make a roux with the drippings. Beef broth or water added slowly, stirred until a thin brown gravy formed around the meat. Poured over white rice that had been cooked while the gravy came together. In the farming communities of the Mississippi Delta and the rural counties of Arkansas, this was called hamburger gravy, and it was understood that 1/4 pound of meat could feed a family of 5 over rice without anyone walking away hungry. Ground beef cost 49 cents a pound in 1965. A cup of dry rice cost less than a dime. 4 people full for under 30 cents a serving. There is no restaurant in America that has figured out how to charge for that ratio. There never will be. The math doesn't work in their favor. Now, tomato aspic is a sort of Jell-O juice hybrid. And no, we're not even going to attempt to justify that one. Picture this: a squishy, gelatinous tomato mass on the plate, glistening as if it is ready for a 1960s cookbook. This dish was the crown jewel of Sunday supper tables for decades, and it came topped with the pièce de résistance, a nice big spoonful of mayonnaise. It wasn't just the texture of aspic that brought the dish to fame. It was a dish that said, "I know my way around a kitchen," because making one required skill. Tomato juice was mixed with gelatin and the right proportion of other ingredients such as Worcestershire sauce, onion, and celery. Once prepared, it was portioned like a cake and could be eaten as a first course or as an accompaniment. People loved to bring it to Sunday parties because it seemed very elegant and could be prepared in advance. But let's be real. Its wobbling appeal was polarizing. You either thought it was the bomb.com because it was the perfect mix of sour and salty, or you were like, "Meh, I'll take the beans, please." Tomato aspic is now best known as a joke, but it was a popular dish when gelatin was the go-to ingredient in many recipes. Nostalgic or nightmarish? That's for you to decide. Number 21. Cornbread salad. Crumbled cornbread, canned pinto beans, diced raw onion, layered in a bowl, dressed with nothing but the bean liquid, and served cold. In Alabama and Mississippi, this was the church supper women brought when the kitchen was too hot to turn on the oven. No cooking required. Just yesterday's leftover cornbread turned into tomorrow's potluck offering. A box of Jiffy cornbread mix cost 12 cents in 1968. A can of pinto beans cost 15 cents. The onion came from the garden or cost a penny at the roadside stand. Ida Mae Thompson in Meridian, Mississippi, brought this to Mount Zion Baptist Church every June for 22 years. She told the ladies' circle that cold cornbread salad was the only recipe the Lord gave her, and she was not going to argue with the Lord. The bowl came back clean every time. Preserving food in brine dates back thousands of years, with ancient Mesopotamians and Egyptians perfecting the art of pickling. While cucumbers became the star, the leftover juice didn't go to waste. It was a secret ingredient long before it became trendy. By the 20th century, pickle juice had solidified its place in American kitchens, particularly in the South, where it added a tangy twist to everything from potato salad to barbecue marinades. Pickle juice isn't just for sipping straight from the jar, though some swear by it. Its acidic punch works wonders in marinades, breaking down proteins to tenderize meats while infusing them with flavor. It's also a game changer in dressings, replacing vinegar or lemon juice for a unique depth. Even a splash in mashed potatoes or deviled eggs can make a familiar dish unforgettable. For the frugal cook, pickle juice was liquid gold. Throwing it away would have been unthinkable when every penny counted. It flavored dishes, stretched ingredients, and even kept boiled eggs fresh and tangy for weeks. Interestingly, pickle juice is packed with electrolytes like sodium and potassium, making it a natural sports drink. Just ask any long-distance runner. Number 14. Bread pudding. Stale bread, milk, sugar. That was the foundation. The bread got torn into pieces, soaked in the milk and sugar, maybe cracked an egg in if there was one, and baked until it puffed up and turned golden. In New Orleans, Bread pudding eventually became a restaurant dessert with whiskey sauce and powdered sugar. In the kitchens where it started, it was a promise that nothing would go to waste. A loaf that had gone hard was not trash. It was tomorrow's dessert. In 1932, a boarding house cook in Memphis named Hazel Turner made bread pudding every Friday with the week's leftover bread. She served it to 12 boarders and charged 2 cents a slice. She later said the secret was not the recipe. It was knowing that people who are hungry do not care if the bread is fresh. That philosophy ran through every kitchen in Depression-era America. A stale heel of bread that a modern family would toss in the garbage was the beginning of something worth eating. Waste was the real enemy, not poverty itself. Bread pudding was proof of that. Number 13, navy bean soup. A pound of dried navy beans, a ham bone, water. It simmered on the stove for hours until the beans broke down into a thick, creamy broth. The ham bone gave it salt and richness without costing a cent. Butchers gave ham bones away because nobody wanted them. During the Depression, women in factory towns across Ohio and Pennsylvania kept a pot of navy bean soup going on the back burner for days, adding water when it got too thick. The United States Senate has served navy bean soup in its dining room every single day since 1903. The version that mattered was the one made in a dented pot on a coal stove by a woman who could not afford a second course. A pound of navy beans cost 8 cents in 1935. For that, you fed a family of 6. That math kept people alive. Number 16, funeral potatoes. Frozen hash browns, a can of cream of chicken soup, crushed cornflakes on top, baked until the cornflakes turned golden and the potatoes underneath melted into something warm and filling and impossibly comforting. The Relief Society of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints made this dish so often for grieving families that it earned its name from the occasion. By the 1950s, funeral potatoes had spread beyond Utah and Idaho into Methodist and Baptist churches across the Great Plains. A bag of frozen hash browns cost 39 cents in 1960. A can of soup cost 15 cents. A box of cornflakes cost a quarter. You could comfort an entire bereaved family for under 80 cents. That was the economics of grief in mid-century America. You could not fix the loss. You could not fill the empty chair. But you could fill the table, and for one evening, surrounded by the smell of something warm and familiar, that had to be enough. The dish earned its name honestly. Number 3, ham and beans. A pound of dry navy beans cost about 14 cents at the IGA in 1955, and a leftover ham bone with shreds of meat clinging to it was free if you had served the ham on Sunday. Country grandmothers in Kentucky, Tennessee, and southern Illinois built a one-pot Monday supper out of those two things. Soak the beans overnight in a crock on the back of the counter, drain them in the morning, drop them into a deep iron pot with the ham bone, a halved yellow onion, a clove of garlic, 2 bay leaves, and enough water to cover by 3 fingers. Slow simmer on the back burner all afternoon while the wringer washer ran in the basement and the sheets hung on the line. 4 hours later, the broth had gone milky and rich, the beans had gone soft, and the meat had fallen off the bone in long shreds. A pan of cornbread baked in the oven during the last 20 minutes. Supper for 7, almost free. Number 21, creamed chipped beef on toast. The military gave it a name that cannot be printed here. Mothers kept it clean. Thin slices of dried beef, salt-cured and almost leathery, torn into strips and dropped into a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, poured over thick slices of white toast. That was supper. In working-class neighborhoods across Ohio and Pennsylvania, and in mill towns from the Piedmont to the Monongahela Valley, this was a weeknight staple from the 1940s all the way through the 1960s. A jar of dried beef cost 35 cents in 1965. It fed 4 people over toast. The roux had to be stirred constantly or it scorched, which is why every woman who made it stood at the stove the whole time. There were no shortcuts. The white sauce either came together smooth or it didn't. Most mothers could tell by the smell when it was right. They didn't use a timer, they just knew. That is a kind of skill you can't buy. Don't worry, No rabbits were harmed in the making of Welsh rabbits. This misnamed dish was ooey gooey cheese sauce poured over toast and comfort food that made Sunday supper feel like a cozy celebration. The name is from the 18th century British humor that gave it the name poor man's meat. But the flavor? Rich and satisfying. The real star was the cheese sauce, made with sharp cheddar, mustard, and sometimes a splash of beer or Worcestershire. Once it bubbled up and got all melty, it turned a simple slice of toast into something decadent. It was cheap, quick to whip up, and downright indulgent, and families loved it. Welsh rabbit was also a good way to get rid of the cheese drawer, which, let's be honest, is the most underrated kitchen space. These days, it's basically a fancy cousin of cheese fondue, but back then it was a lifesaver for families trying to stretch their groceries. It still holds up today. Serve it with a side salad or a dollop of chutney, and you've got a meal. Number 18, church supper hot dish. Ground beef browned in a skillet. A can of cream of mushroom soup. Frozen tater tots layered on top. Baked at 375 until the tots turned crispy and the soup bubbled underneath like a Midwestern promise. This was the dish Mildred Oakes brought to her Baptist church in Pikeville for 14 years. She learned it from her mother-in-law, who learned it from a Lutheran church cookbook published in Mankato, Minnesota in 1930. That cookbook was the first written record of what Minnesotans call hot dish. By 1960, cream of mushroom soup had become so central to church cooking that Lutheran women called it the binder. Not a seasoning, not a shortcut, the binder. The thing that held a church supper together the way hymns held a service together. A can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup cost 15 cents in 1963. A pound of ground beef cost 45 cents. A bag of frozen tater tots cost 29 cents. Mildred's entire casserole fed 8 people for under $1. She tithed 10% of her husband's mining wages every Sunday, and she fed the church every Wednesday on what was left. That was not generosity. That was faith measured in casserole dishes. She never missed a single Wednesday in 14 years. Not when her husband had his accident. Not when her youngest left for Vietnam. She showed up with that hot dish because the church needed feeding and she was the one who fed it. When Mildred died in 1979, the women of the congregation printed her recipe on the back of her memorial card. Brown the beef, add the soup, top with tots, bake until done. That was everything she left behind. That and a church full of people who never went hungry on a Wednesday night. In the early 19th century, fresh milk wasn't always easy to come by, especially in rural areas or during long winters. Enter evaporated milk, created by removing about 60% of the water from regular milk and canning the thickened result. This innovation, patented in 1856, quickly became a pantry hero, providing a shelf-stable source of creaminess when refrigeration was a luxury. By the early 20th century, it was a wartime staple and a lifesaver for families during the Great Depression. Evaporated milk's versatility is what set it apart. In soups and sauces, it added richness without the heaviness of cream. For desserts, it brought a velvety texture to pies, puddings, and even fudge. And unlike fresh milk, it didn't curdle when exposed to heat, a true kitchen workhorse. Grandma might have even used it to whip up a quick substitute for cream in her coffee. Economically, evaporated milk was a budget-friendly option that could stretch recipes without sacrificing quality. A single can could transform a basic meal into something luxurious, all without breaking the bank. Practical, creamy, and reliable, evaporated milk was, and still is, a timeless kitchen ally. Number 18, dandelion greens with bacon grease. After a long winter of potatoes, dried beans, and salt pork, the first dandelion greens in the yard were treated like a gift from the ground itself. Mabel Combs in Letcher County, Kentucky, sent her children out every April with paper sacks to pick the young leaves before they turned bitter. She piled them in a bowl, poured hot bacon grease straight from the morning skillet over the top, and added a splash of vinegar. That was the whole recipe, greens that cost nothing, fat from the morning bacon, a sharp bite from whatever was in the pantry. In Appalachia and across Pennsylvania Dutch country, Families had been eating dandelion greens this way for generations. Old-timers called them a spring tonic. They believed the bitterness cleaned the blood after months of heavy winter food. Whether that was true or not, the craving was real. Dandelion greens grew in every yard, every ditch, every cracked sidewalk in every town in America. A woman in Scranton, Pennsylvania, told her daughter that picking dandelions was the first chore she ever gave her children. She wanted them to understand that food did not always come from a store. Sometimes it came from the ground right under their feet. That lesson does not expire. Veggie noodle fritters are the next trend in healthy eating. They're the star of the show, the it girl, the one that makes everyone's head turn, and Thai dish manages to do it with only 3 ingredients. They're simple ones too. Have you ever heard of carrot noodles? They're a kind of vegetable noodles that really have their own earthy flavor and this super tender texture with a crisp exterior when you fry them. Plus, they look amazing when you do. That golden hue puts in work. The egg works as a binder, helping the Parmesan cheese stick to the noodles to really create the entire vibe and bring it together, while also giving it a creamy texture and a richness that only gets amplified by the Parmesan. All in all, it's one of the best ways to get more greens in your diet in a familiar and delicious way. I also really can't stress how good this dish looks. The spiralized, shredded vegetables, the bounded fritters, and the golden brown colors all make for an extremely appealing dish to look at. They have an amazing balance of style, taste, and textures, which makes this dish work on all fronts. Plus, we all could do with a bit more zucchinis every now and then, right? Number 20. Scalloped potatoes and ham. This was the dish a landlady made when she needed to feed everyone from one pan and have it stretch. Thin slices of potato got layered in a baking dish with flour, salt, and milk, then dotted with whatever scraps of ham were left from an earlier meal. An hour in the oven turned it into a bubbling, golden, creamy supper that smelled like home from the front porch. A little leftover ham flavored the whole thing, so a few ounces of meat fed a crowd. It belonged to the same family of plain, hearty fare that filled boarding house tables, meatloaf, beef stew, pot roast, and pies of every kind. The boarders sat at one long common table and passed the dish hand to hand until the pan scraped empty. It was warm, cheap, and deeply satisfying, the kind of food that made a rented room feel a little less lonely. Scalloped potatoes and ham proved that thrift and comfort could sit on the same plate. Number 25. Chili and crackers. A church in Tulsa, Oklahoma served this every single Wednesday night from 1958 to 1971. 1 can of chili heated in a pot, a sleeve of saltine crackers on the side, a glass of water. That was church supper for 200 families sitting on metal folding chairs in a fellowship hall that smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. The chili came from a number 10 can that cost $1.89 and served 15 people. The crackers cost a dime. The women who ran that kitchen did not have a budget. They had a prayer. If you walked into a Piggly Wiggly in 1962, a can of Hormel chili cost 29 cents. You could feed your family of 4 for less than $1 and still bring enough for the church table. That was the math of survival. Not fancy, not proud, just fed. Corned beef hash from a can became an unlikely hero for seniors who needed hot, filling meals without the fuss of extensive preparation. The rectangular cans lined grocery store shelves at budget-friendly prices, containing a mixture of corned beef and potatoes that transformed when properly cooked. The secret was patience, spreading the hash in a hot, greased skillet and leaving it alone until a dark, crispy crust formed on the bottom. That crust was the prize, shattering against the teeth before giving way to the soft, savory interior. A fried egg placed on top turned it into a complete meal, the runny yolk creating an instant sauce that coated every bite. Seniors living alone appreciated that a single can provided 2 generous servings, each one satisfying enough to carry them through to the next meal. The dish required only a skillet and a few minutes of attention, making it perfect for those days when cooking felt like too much effort. Corned beef hash proved that convenience and comfort could coexist beautifully. Number 19. Cabbage and salt pork. A head of cabbage cost 9 cents in 1963. A quarter pound of salt pork cost about 12 cents. Together in a single pot, covered with water and simmered for an hour, they became something that fed a table of 6 for under 25 cents total. In the German farming communities of central Missouri and the Czech settlements of South Texas, the pot liquor from the cabbage was considered as valuable as the cabbage itself. Children were given the broth in a cup like a drink. Nothing was left in the pot. That's how cheap and effective this meal was. The salt pork flavored everything it touched, and when you pulled it out after cooking, whatever meat clung to the bone was divided between the smallest children first. The woman at the pot didn't have to be told that. It wasn't discussed. It was understood. You fed the young ones from what was closest to the bone. Back in those days, that was just how it worked. Milk toast was the best comfort food before macaroni and cheese became the king of all comfort foods. This dish, which was as easy as it was old-fashioned, was one of those that families who preferred comfort to glamour would cook for Sunday supper. Here's how it worked. Pieces of bread were baked until they became golden brown and then soaked in warm milk. On top of it, butter was spread liberally, and at times a dash of sugar or cinnamon was also sprinkled. The outcome was a soft, cozy meal that could be described as a hug in a plate. Milk toast was not only a meal, it was a tradition. It was given to kids, the elderly, or anyone who had a cold, and it was the food equivalent of a warm blanket. Though it may not look like much by today's standards, back then it was a luxury to have when ingredients were rationed and money was even more limited. What is interesting is that milk toast has sunk to oblivion, which is rather surprising given the fact that it was popular in the past. Perhaps it is too simple for today's taste buds, or perhaps it is just that we have lost touch with how good simple food can be. In either case, milk toast deserves a second chance, or at least a second glance, for anyone who wants to take a trip back in time and sample a dish that is as mild as it is meaningful. Number 23, Depression Casserole. Ground beef, canned corn, sliced potatoes, layered in a baking dish and cooked until the potatoes softened and the beef fat soaked into every layer. This recipe had no name in 1934. Women just called it supper. It appeared in church cookbooks across the Midwest with slight variations but always the same bones: meat on the bottom, starch on top, a vegetable somewhere in between. A pound of ground beef cost 12 cents during the Depression. A can of corn cost a nickel. The potatoes came from the garden. The whole dish fed a family of 6 for under 20 cents. By the 1950s, Baptist churches in Tennessee and Georgia were serving this at homecoming dinners, feeding 60 people from a dozen casserole pans lined up on folding tables covered with paper tablecloths. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote about it. If you grew up in the rural South, you knew this dish. It showed up because that was what those women did. Few items in the kitchen have worn as many hats as vinegar. Once hailed as a staple of ancient civilizations, it has roots stretching back to Babylon around 5000 BCE, when it was first derived from fermented dates. Roman soldiers drank it diluted as a thirst quencher, and Cleopatra supposedly used it to dissolve pearls for an extravagant drink. In the culinary world, vinegar's acidic magic is undeniable. It tenderizes tough cuts of meat, breaks down fibers, and draws out subtle flavors. Think of it as the backstage crew that makes the leading stars, like marinades and dressings, truly shine. It's also a secret weapon for balancing overly sweet or heavy dishes, cutting through richness like a sharp wit at the dinner table. For frugal households, vinegar was a dream. Cheap, shelf-stable, and endlessly useful, it pulled double duty as a cleaner. A splash could deglaze a pan one moment and shine copper pots the next. During lean times, it even flavored water for shrubs, simple yet refreshing drinks. Health-wise, some of Grandma's vinegar tricks weren't just folklore. Apple cider vinegar, for example, has long been linked to digestion and blood sugar regulation. Number 7. Creamed chipped beef on toast, dried beef, flour, milk, poured over toast. Soldiers called it something unprintable, but they ate it 3 times a week in every branch of the military from World War I through Vietnam. The Army version appeared in the Manual of Army Cooks as far back as 1910. After the wars, veterans brought the recipe home and kept making it because it was cheap, it was fast, and it tasted like the only part of service they did not mind remembering. A jar of dried chipped beef cost about 25 cents in the 1940s. A loaf of bread cost 10 cents. For under 50 cents, you could feed a family of 4. In diners across the Midwest, creamed chipped beef on toast stayed on the menu through the 1970s. It was real food made by real people who knew what it meant to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Let's add a lifesaver to your roster. A pizza roll can be the difference between sleep for dinner and a good night's rest with nice dreams and a full stomach, and I always want the second for you. I still know that pizza rolls aren't really the most reliable thing to have at late hours of the night, though, unless you just happen to regularly keep stocks of them, in which case, kudos to your dedication. For the more spontaneous viewer that makes their week as it goes along like I do, this 3-ingredient recipe for pizza rolls is a total lifesaver. You just need a simple dough, whether it's homemade or store-bought, any kind of your favorite cheese and a tomato sauce, and voila, you have yourself a pizza ready to go. It's a pretty simple one, but with just a bit of baking and good skills with rolling, you'll have pocket pizza wherever you go. Also, it doubles as the perfect snack to offer someone when they're hungry. You always want to be that guy who's quick with a bite to eat. You get places in life faster that way. Similarly, sometimes you need to cut back on the junk and eat a little bit on the greener side of things. Stuff like black bean soup has always helped out so much when it comes to cultivating a better environment for your body on the inside. And the fact that it's inherently so simple only helps it be more of an all-rounder that you definitely need in your arsenal. All you need for this is just your garlic, cumin, onions, and black beans. The garlic or cumin are up to you. You can pick which one to add between the two, but again, it's a very simple soup that is so beginner-friendly that even people with no cooking experience can get up and make some. It takes nothing and leaves you feeling a lot better and stronger than you otherwise would. So maybe invest in some black beans next time you go grocery shopping. Number 17, Welsh Rarebit. Despite the fancy-sounding name, this was a poor man's supper dressed up just enough to feel like a treat. A sharp cheese sauce, loosened with a splash of beer or milk and seasoned with mustard, was poured bubbling hot over thick slices of toast. That was the whole dish. Melted cheese on bread, but done right, it was rich and savory and surprisingly satisfying. For a boarding house cook, it was a blessing on a meatless night, because a small wedge of cheese and a loaf of bread could feed everyone. It came over from Britain and settled comfortably into American supper tables, where folks served it for a light evening meal or a late snack. It filled bellies without touching the meat budget at all. The dish slowly faded as cheaper convenience foods crowded it out. Welsh Rarebit was humble comfort that made a plain slice of toast feel like something special. Number 16, the landlady's fried chicken. This is the platter that filled a whole table for pennies a plate, the one we opened the door on at the start. On a good week, the boarding house cook would buy up the cheaper cuts of chicken, soak them, dredge them in seasoned flour, and fry them golden in a heavy iron skillet until the whole house smelled like Sunday. Out it came on a big platter at the center of the common table, set beside biscuits passed hand to hand and bowls of butter beans and hot cobbler. One chicken, cut up small and fried crisp, could feed a dozen hungry boarders who had been working since dawn. The crackle of that crust and the warmth of those past biscuits were what turned a house full of strangers into something close to a family for an hour. Today, fried chicken comes from a bucket under bright lights. The landlady's skillet version, made for a room full of tired workers, is the one worth remembering. Number 23, Depression Casserole. Ground beef, canned corn, sliced potatoes, layered in a baking dish and cooked until the potatoes softened and the beef fat soaked into every layer. This recipe had no name in 1934. Women just called it supper. It appeared in church cookbooks across the Midwest with slight variations but always the same bones: meat on the bottom, starch on top, a vegetable somewhere in between. A pound of ground beef cost 12 cents during the Depression. A can of corn cost a nickel. The potatoes came from the garden. The whole dish fed a family of 6 for under 20 cents. By the 1950s, Baptist churches in Tennessee and Georgia were serving this at homecoming dinners, feeding 60 people from a dozen casserole pans lined up on folding tables covered with paper tablecloths. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote about it. If you grew up in the rural South, you knew this dish. It showed up because that was what those women did. Number 1. Skillet sausage gravy and biscuits. This was the supper a Southern grandmother made on the worst nights, when she had been on her feet since 5 in the morning and could not face one more minute of fuss at a stove. Brown a half-pound of breakfast sausage in her iron pan. Sprinkle a heaping tablespoon of flour over the meat. Stir it into the grease until the flour turned the color of sand. Pour in 2 cups of whole milk. Whisk slow until the gravy thickened around the bits of sausage. Salt and a hard crank of black pepper. Drop spoonfuls of buttermilk biscuit dough right onto the simmering gravy. Lid the pan and walk away for 12 minutes. The biscuit steamed open and turned fluffy on top. 1 pan, 1 spoon. She sat down with a plate of it in her own chair at the head of the table, and for the first time since the rooster crowed, nobody was asking her for anything. Number 22. Tomato gravy on biscuits. When the garden exploded with tomatoes in August and there was nothing else ready to pick, a woman in rural Tennessee or the upland counties of Georgia made tomato gravy. She melted bacon grease in a skillet, added a spoonful of flour and let it brown, then poured in garden tomatoes she had crushed by hand. Salt, a pinch of sugar, black pepper. She stirred it until the flour and tomatoes became something thicker, tangier, and more satisfying than either one alone. Poured over split biscuits, it was a full meal. By mid-September, when the tomatoes were coming in faster than they could be canned, families ate this 4 or 5 nights running. It did not feel like poverty food when the tomatoes were that ripe. It felt like the best time of the year. Healthy, filling, free from the garden. Appalachian communities still make tomato gravy today. They don't call it poverty food. They call it summer. Just think about eating fluffy and warm bread and getting a delicious combination of spiced meat and soft cabbage instead. You know, something that is just perfect for comfort food, right? Meat and cabbage pockets were the quiet stars of the classic Sunday dinner that could be eaten with the help of 2 hands while being warm and enveloped in the embrace of dough. Favorite with farming families and immigrant populations, these tiny morsels offered both cheap and hearty meals for many people, for the cost of a $5 or less. The filling was a basic but enchanting mixture of ground beef, onions, cabbage, and a pinch of salt, pepper, and occasionally caraway seeds. It was a hand-rolled dough, which was then folded around the mixture before being baked to a golden brown. These pockets were not only tasty, they were useful. They could be prepared beforehand, warmed up for the second time, or placed into a basket for a picnic. While they may have a cousin in the modern empanadas or pierogies, there was something special about beef and cabbage pockets. These were the main dishes of any family dinner, gone before the Jell-O mold even got on the table. Today, they are a reminder of the past when Sunday supper was a tradition of coming together for a good meal and people. Yeah. Number 13. Green bean casserole. 2 cans of green beans. 1 can of cream of mushroom soup. A handful of French fried onions on top. Baked at 350 for 25 minutes. This recipe was invented in 1955 by Dorcas Riley at the Campbell Soup Company Test Kitchen in Camden, New Jersey. She created it for the Associated Press, and within 5 years it had migrated from holiday tables to church fellowship halls across the country. By 1965, you could not walk into a covered dish supper without seeing at least 2 pans of green bean casserole on the table. The canned beans cost 10 cents each, the soup cost 15 cents, the fried onions cost a quarter. An entire casserole that served 8 people cost 60 cents. Dorcas Riley never made a penny from the recipe. She gave it away for free, the same way church women gave away their time and their cooking. When she died in 2018, the New York Times ran her obituary. The headline mentioned the casserole. That was how the world remembered her. Not a bad legacy for 60 cents worth of canned goods. Citrus zest, often overlooked and thrown away, has been used in cooking for centuries. While lemons, oranges, and limes have graced kitchens for thousands of years, the zest, the colorful outer peel, was once considered a precious part of the fruit. In fact, ancient Romans and Greeks used citrus zest not just in cooking, but also for its medicinal properties. By the 19th century, the zest became more commonly seen in both sweet and savory dishes, especially in European and Mediterranean cuisines. What makes citrus zest so valuable is its ability to brighten a dish without overpowering it. A sprinkle of lemon zest can elevate a cake, giving it an aromatic freshness that no other ingredient can match. In salads, it provides a burst of flavor that cuts through heavy dressings, and in main dishes, it offers a lively contrast to rich meats or seafood. The zest has an almost magical ability to enhance the overall flavor of any dish it touches. For frugal cooks, zest was a way to use every part of the fruit. While the juice might be the star, the zest adds a layer of complexity and a small but impactful punch of flavor that stretch the fruit further. Number 15. Hot water cornbread. Cornmeal. Boiling water, a little salt. Women mixed it into a thick paste, shaped it into small patties with their hands, and dropped them into a skillet of hot grease. They fried up golden on the outside and dense and warm on the inside. In the rural South, hot water cornbread was the bread of people who could not afford flour for biscuits. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost 15 cents in 1935, and it made dozens of patties. There was no egg, no milk, no baking powder, just corn and water and heat. The technique went back to Native American cooking. Cornmeal and water, shaped by hand, cooked over fire. Settlers learned it and passed it down, and by the time the Depression hit, hot water cornbread was second nature in homes across Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Women made it 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes as a side, sometimes as the whole meal with a bowl of beans or a glass of buttermilk. It was as old as the country itself, and it fed more Americans than most people will ever know. Not really a soup person? Salads might be more your thing, in which case I have one that's also a pretty good starting point for people who don't have much time under their belt in the kitchen. Wedge salads are something you can make on any lazy day or when you're feeling low and don't want to spend a lot of time cooking. And let's be honest, we all have those days. One thing they don't tell you about cooking is that it kind of drains you, and you don't even feel like eating what you made afterwards. But of course, everyone has their own pace. Whatever your process is, though, a wedge salad will help it get along faster. All you need here is a wedge of lettuce, some blue cheese or ranch dressing, depending on what you're going for, and a few strips of bacon. You get smokiness, crunchiness from both the bacon and the lettuce, and a lovely dressing or melted cheese to tie it together. What's not to love here? Speaking of rolls, there's more than just the pizza kind if you're the type of person that enjoys a good wrap. Some people tend to lean towards the sweeter side of things, and for them, I have a wonderful delicacy known as banana peanut butter rolls. The bananas work as a sweet base here that really helps tie it all together when the final product is done, and the peanut butter adds a lot of richness to that base and gives this dish its signature nutty flavor that'll have you keep coming back for seconds. As for the wrap, you can use pita bread or tortilla, or even make it like a shawarma, depending on the kind of textures you like and how you prefer assembling your wrap. See, it's really important to have new, varied ways of switching up old classics. We've all become too familiar with bananas, peanut butter, and rolls, but if you throw all them together, you get to enjoy all of them in a way you haven't before, and that breathes some new life into a familiar and comfortable experience. It's a win-win all around, isn't it? Number 22. Oyster stew. It is hard to believe now, but there was a stretch of years when oysters were so plentiful and cheap that they counted as poor folks' food. Up and down the East Coast, a bowl of oyster stew was a common supper. Just oysters gently warmed in milk or cream with butter and a little pepper, ready in minutes. Irish Catholic families leaned on it for meatless nights and made it their Christmas Eve tradition, and from there it spread across the whole country. A boarding house near the water could set out a steaming tureen of it for almost nothing and call it a feast. Old cookbooks from before the Second World War were stuffed with oyster recipes because the shellfish were everywhere. Then the beds got fished out, the price climbed, and oysters turned into a treat for special occasions. Most younger people have never tasted a real oyster stew. It went from everyday supper to forgotten luxury in a single lifetime. Number 12. Tuna and cracker bake. 1 can of tuna, a sleeve of saltine crackers, a cup of milk, layered in a baking dish, crackers on the bottom, tuna mixed with milk poured over the top, more crackers, then baked until everything fused into a salty, creamy, golden brick that held together when you cut it into squares. A 1961 Baptist Ladies' Circle cookbook from rural Tennessee included this recipe with a note that read, "For when there is nothing else." A can of tuna cost 25 cents in 1960. A box of crackers cost 19 cents. The milk came from the refrigerator. The whole thing cost less than 50 cents and fed a family of 4 or filled a church pan for 6. This was not a dish you bragged about. This was a dish you made when the paycheck was 3 days away and the pantry held nothing but cans and crackers. The women who brought it to church supper did not announce what it was. They set it on the table and stepped back and let people serve themselves. Nobody asked questions. If you have ever been 3 days from payday with nothing in the pantry, you understood. Number 6. Skillet hamburger pie. This was the pot that stretched a single pound of ground beef across 5 plates and a packed lunch. Brown the meat in a deep iron pan with 1 chopped onion. Drain off the grease into the tin can on the stove. Stir in a can of cut green beans straight from the cellar and a can of cream of mushroom soup. Spread the meat flat in the pan. Heap a bowl of mashed potatoes over the top, edge to edge. Slide the whole pan into the oven for 20 minutes until the potato peaks browned. Cut into wedges like a real pie. 1 slice for each child, 1 for the husband, 1 wrapped in waxed paper for the lunch pail next morning. Number 14. Poor man's stew. 2 or 3 potatoes, 1 onion, a package of hot dogs sliced into rounds. Browned in a skillet with oil until the potatoes were golden at the edges, then covered with a little water and simmered until everything was soft and the broth had thickened with potato starch. Some families added a can of baked beans at the end. Others added ketchup, which sounds strange until you taste it and understand that the sweetness cut through the starch the way nothing else did. In the small factory towns of West Virginia and along the coal fields of southwestern Virginia, this was called poor man's stew without any embarrassment. Hot dogs cost 29 cents a package in 1965. Potatoes were 5 cents a pound. The whole pot cost under 40 cents. What is remarkable is not that families ate this way. What is remarkable is that it tasted good. It still does. Cheap food works, beautiful in its own honest way. It's a quiet Sunday at the dinner table and you're ready to dig into a plate of golden brown codfish cakes with creamy peas. This meal wasn't just a dish back in the day. It was a solution to tough times. Codfish cakes, made with salted cod, mashed potatoes, and a little seasoning, were a frugal way to turn pantry staples into something special. The creamy peas, a luxury addition that made you forget you were eating on a budget. The real MVP of this recipe was salted cod, which could sit in the pantry forever and still come to life with a good soak. The cakes were fried up crispy on the outside and soft on the inside, like edible comfort. Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. On the other hand, creamed peas made a basic veggie rich and buttery. They balanced each other out like the perfect culinary couple. This isn't a meal that gets lost in the shuffle. And it's the kind of dish that makes you want to call your grandparents and ask for their secret recipe, then spend the evening wondering how a simple can of peas and some codfish could taste so good. Number 20. Pork and beans with Franks. 1 can of pork and beans, 2 hot dogs sliced into coins, a squirt of mustard stirred in, heated on the stove for 10 minutes and brought to church in a covered pot. In 1965, A can of Van Camp's pork and beans cost 13 cents. A package of hot dogs cost 49 cents and made 4 servings. This was the Wednesday night supper that single mothers brought because it was the one thing their children would eat without complaint and the one thing they could make after a 10-hour shift at the textile mill. It never won any ribbons. But the pot was always empty by the end of the night. Always. That told you everything you needed to know about who was eating and what they could afford. The women who made it did not need praise. They needed the pot back by Sunday. Sweetened condensed milk was born out of necessity. In the mid-19th century, when fresh milk wasn't always accessible, innovators like Gail Borden figured out how to preserve milk by removing most of its water content and adding sugar. The result was a thick, syrupy concoction that could be stored for long periods, making it a godsend in both rural households and military rations during the Civil War. In the kitchen, sweetened condensed milk transformed the way people made desserts. Its rich, creamy consistency added body to pies, cakes, and candies, and its sweetness was often the perfect base for fudge, caramel, or even simple no-bake cookies. What made it so special was its ability to enhance flavor without the need for added sugar, taking desserts from ordinary to extraordinary with just one ingredient. For those looking to stretch their food dollar, sweetened condensed milk was a real gem. A can could go a long way, turning a simple dessert into something that seemed far more decadent than it really was. During tough times, this treat was a rare indulgence without breaking the budget. Number 9. Fried egg sandwich. Bread, an egg, a little butter or bacon grease in the skillet. That was it. In 1934, eggs cost about 12 cents a dozen. For a penny an egg, a fried egg sandwich could fill you up for hours. Some people called it a one-eyed Sam when they cut a hole in the bread and fried the egg right inside it. Others just fried the egg flat and folded the bread around it. In factory towns across the Rust Belt, men carried fried egg sandwiches wrapped in wax paper to their shifts because they were cheap, fast, and did not need to be kept cold. A man named Walter Jablonski in Gary, Indiana, ate a fried egg sandwich for lunch every workday for 22 years at the steel mill. His daughter said he never once asked for anything different. It was not that he did not want more, it was that the sandwich was honest and it did the job. That was enough. So you have a sweet tooth, but you have no patience for sticking with the delicate and sensitive process of baking. You need some easy recipes, and lucky for you, that's exactly what I'm peddling today. For you, my dear effort-allergic viewer, I have sheet pan granolas, which are actually so much better for you than you'll even think to realize. Don't worry, I hate baking too, and I especially hate eating oatmeal as it is. But with this combination, I can kind of get the best of all three worlds. Rolled oats are used as the base of the granola before nuts and seeds are added, finally topping it all off with a honey or maple syrup glaze that really helps the oats stick together and seal that crunchiness in. End result? You get your protein, your sugar, and your dry fruits together all in one, and it barely takes a minute of baking. Get a crunchy and nice granola going for literally none of the effort or money. Isn't it the most American thing ever to work smart and not hard? The thing is, we could all use a lot more oats in our diet than we normally have right now. It's not just the protein thing. They have a host of other benefits. You know how much fiber is in these things? That also has the added benefit of keeping you full for longer. You got to invest in different ways of getting it in your system to keep things fresh. Number 19, peach cobbler. 1 cup of self-rising flour, 1 cup of sugar, 1 can of sliced peaches with the syrup. Mixed together, poured into a greased pan, and baked at 350 until the top turned golden and the fruit bubbled through the crust like lava. This was the cuppa recipe that every Southern grandmother knew by heart. A cup of this, a cup of that, a cup of the other thing. No measuring spoons, no thermometer, no second guessing. The recipe appeared in church cookbooks from Texas to the Carolinas, starting in the 1940s and never left. A can of peaches cost 19 cents in 1955. The flour and sugar were pantry staples that every kitchen already had. Dessert for 12 people cost less than a quarter, and the woman who brought it to church walked through that fellowship hall door like she was carrying gold. Because she was. Number 4, skillet pork chops and apples. The pairing was already cemented in American kitchens by the mid-1800s, with a recipe for pork chops and applesauce running in Good Housekeeping in 1893 and another in Fanny Farmer's Boston Cooking School cookbook in 1896. German immigrant farm wives in Pennsylvania, Missouri, and the Ozarks made it in one pan because the orchard ripened the week the hogs were slaughtered. Brown 4 thin pork chops in her iron pan with a spoonful of lard. Lift the chops out, slice 2 tart apples into thick rings, drop them into the pork fat, and let them caramelize for 4 minutes. Lay the chops back over the apples. Lid on, lowest flame, 12 minutes. The apples broke down into a sauce. The chops finished tender. Number 12. Mulligan Stew. Before the Depression gave it its most famous chapter, Mulligan stew existed in the hobo camps of the early 1900s, where itinerant workers threw whatever they had into a communal pot. By the 1930s, it had moved from the railroad camps into the kitchens of American homes, and by the 1960s, it was still showing up on supper tables across the rural Midwest and the mill country of the Carolinas. The defining feature was that it had no fixed recipe. Carrots, potatoes, whatever onions were left, a can of peas with its liquid, whatever piece of beef could be found. A 1940 recipe from the Brookshire Times called for corned beef, canned peas, onion, water, and an entire bottle of ketchup, simmered over a low flame for 1 hour. The ketchup sounds wrong. The first spoonful convinces you otherwise. Every family's version tasted different because every family's pantry was different. That was the point. That was always the point. You worked with what you had, and it was better for being honest. Number 12. Tuna and cracker bake. 1 can of tuna, a sleeve of saltine crackers, a cup of milk, layered in a baking dish, crackers on the bottom, tuna mixed with milk poured over the top, more crackers, then baked until everything fused into a salty, creamy, golden brick that held together when you cut it into squares. A 1961 Baptist Ladies' Circle cookbook from rural Tennessee included this recipe with a note that read, "For when there is nothing else." A can of tuna cost 25 cents in 1960. A box of crackers cost 19 cents. The milk came from the refrigerator. The whole thing cost less than 50 cents and fed a family of 4 or filled a church pan for 6. This was not a dish you bragged about. This was a dish you made when the paycheck was 3 days away, and the pantry held nothing but cans and crackers. The women who brought it to church supper did not announce what it was. They set it on the table and stepped back and let people serve themselves. Nobody asked questions. If you have ever been 3 days from payday with nothing in the pantry, you understood. Long before it came in colorful boxes, gelatin was a labor of love. Dating back to ancient Egypt, it was painstakingly extracted by boiling animal bones, skin, and connective tissues. By the 17th century, it became a delicacy in Europe, symbolizing wealth because of the time and effort required to make it. It wasn't until the late 19th century, with the invention of powdered gelatin, that it became a household staple. The versatility of gelatin is unmatched. In desserts, it's the backbone of wobbly jellies and fluffy mousses. But its talents don't stop at sweets. Gelatin brings a silky texture to soups, gravies, and aspics, elevating them from simple to sublime. It's a texture enhancer, creating that melt-in-your-mouth feel we often take for granted. In frugal kitchens, gelatin was a godsend. A little went a long way, and it could stretch leftovers into entirely new dishes. Aspics and meat jellies, though considered unusual today, were once elegant centerpieces combining thrift with creativity. It's rich in collagen, which supports skin, joints, and bones. During tough times, it also added protein to diets when meat was scarce. Number 8. Wacky cake. Flour, sugar, and cocoa powder. No eggs, no milk, no butter. The dry ingredients went right in the baking pan. 3 small wells got pressed into the mixture. Vinegar in one, vanilla in another, vegetable oil in the third. Then water over the whole thing, stirred together, and into the oven. That was it. If you have never made a cake without eggs or butter, you would not believe this works. It does. The vinegar and baking soda react to make the batter rise, and the result is a moist chocolate cake that tastes nothing like sacrifice. During World War II, when eggs and butter were rationed, wacky cake became the answer for families who still wanted something sweet. It spread through church cookbooks and handwritten recipe cards from coast to coast. A woman named Dorothy Elkins in Wheeling, West Virginia, copied the recipe onto an index card in 1943 and made it every Saturday for the next 30 years. Her granddaughter still has that card. The ink is faded, but the recipe still works. A whole cake cost less than 20 cents to make. Mothers called it crazy cake or war cake or depression cake, depending on where they lived and which hard time they remembered most. In a country where sugar was rationed to half a pound per person per week, a chocolate cake on the kitchen table was not a small thing. It was proof that even rationing could not take everything away. For families who had given up expecting treats, wacky cake was a quiet rebellion against the idea that being poor meant going without everything good. Your grandmother may have called it something different. The recipe was the same everywhere. That kind of defiance, baked at 350 degrees in a 9x13 pan, is the kind of thing a family does not forget. Maybe you want to start your day off on a citrusy note and start it right too. You know, refreshing, clean, light, all that good jazz. In that case, you need a morning tonic, and not just any old dusty recipe with sparkling water. You need the real thing. I'm talking lemon juice, honey, and ginger. It's a 3-ingredient pick-me-up, but it's got what you need, and it barely takes a minute to mix and shake, and voila, you have your tonic. As legitimate as anything you'd get out of a doctor, it's definitely something you gotta try at least once every now and then. The spiciness of the ginger gives it a kick, but the honey makes it roll into your taste buds with a sweet sensation, rounding it all off with a bright, citrusy afternote thanks to the lemon juice. It's good for your skin, it's refreshing, it costs barely anything, and it'll help your mornings go all the better. What's not to love here? I mean, if people are so willing to invest in Gatorade and other sports drinks that promise to replenish your electrolytes and provide up to thrice the hydration, why not put some stock in an actual healthy, all-natural tonic? Plus, it doesn't even feel like you're chugging some cheap drink. It actually feels and tastes good to sip. Number 10. Boston baked beans and brown bread. Saturday night in a New England house meant a heavy crock of beans had been baking low in the oven since morning. Dried navy beans went in with salt pork, molasses, and a little mustard, then cooked slow for hours until they turned soft and sweet and the sauce went dark as syrup. Alongside came brown bread, a dense loaf of rye, cornmeal, and more molasses, steamed upright in an empty coffee can until it slid out in a perfect cylinder. A few cents of dried beans and pantry staples fed a full table and left plenty for a bean sandwich the next day. The whole thing could sit warm in the oven for hours, which suited a cook who also had Saturday chores to finish. It was filling, frugal, and so woven into the week that whole towns ran bean suppers in church halls. Boston baked beans and brown bread were thrift turned into ritual, and almost no one steams that bread in a can anymore. Number 20. Pork and beans with Frank's. 1 can of pork and beans, 2 hot dogs sliced into coins, a squirt of mustard stirred in, heated on the stove for 10 minutes and brought to church in a covered pot. In 1965, a can of Van Camp's pork and beans cost 13 cents. A package of hot dogs cost 49 cents and made 4 servings. This was the Wednesday night supper that single mothers brought because it was the one thing their children would eat without complaint and the one thing they could make after a 10-hour shift at the textile mill. It never won any ribbons. But the pot was always empty by the end of the night. Always. That told you everything you needed to know about who was eating and what they could afford. The women who made it did not need praise. They needed the pot back by Sunday. Number 2. Skillet mac and cheese. Long before the blue Kraft box arrived in every grocery in 1937, American grandmothers were making mac and cheese on the stovetop in a single pan. Boil a ½ pound of dry elbow macaroni right in 2 cups of whole milk with a knob of butter and a hard shake of salt. Stir often. When the noodles softened 15 minutes in, the milk had thickened into a starchy sauce. Off the heat. Stir in 2 big handfuls of grated sharp cheddar from the brick wrapped in waxed paper in the icebox. The cheese melted in the residual heat. A crack of black pepper. That was supper for 4 children and a tired mother in one pan in 1953 with no oven heat in a hot July kitchen. Number 25. Water gravy on toast. When there was not any milk, butter, or meat left in the house, there was still flour, water, and the drippings stuck to the bottom of a skillet. Your mother scraped those drippings loose, added a spoonful of flour, stirred until it browned, then poured in enough water to pull it all into a thin, dark gravy. She poured it over toast and set it on the table. In the hollows of West Virginia and the mill towns along the Catawba River in North Carolina, water gravy was the meal that appeared when nothing else was left. It didn't have a name in most households. Back then, families called it gravy and bread because naming it would have made it real. Would have meant saying out loud that the week had run dry. A little bacon drippings made it taste richer than it had any right to. 1 skillet, 5 minutes. No pots to wash. That was enough to put something warm in your stomach before bed. Simple food works that way. Jellied chicken salad is the best example of how mid-century cooking can be preserved in aspic. It is the kind of thing that happens when someone asks, "How can we make chicken salad even more vintage?" Oh, I know. Add gelatin. This dish starts innocently enough. Chicken, celery, and mayonnaise. But then things take a turn. And then there is unflavored gelatin, which takes the basic salad and turns it into a wobbling tower of savory aspiration. It's kind of like a Jell-O with meat, but instead of having fruit flavors, it has poultry. The jellied chicken salad was the highlight of Sunday dinners, which, placed in its mold, was displayed on the table. Why? Because it was associated with elegance, or so home chefs thought at the time. It was cold, very manageable, and ideal for making portions for many people. Also, it went well with crackers or a crisp lettuce leaf for that extra special gourmet look. It may not be photogenic today, but jellied chicken salad was at least functional in its context. The gelatin helped to preserve the chicken, and because the meat can be molded easily, it was perfect for potlucks and buffets. Today's people may not fancy it, but there is no doubt that this dish is innovative. It is a relic of a time when people were obsessed with gelatin and a fun conversation piece for anyone willing to attempt it. Number 25. Chili and crackers. A church in Tulsa, Oklahoma served this every single Wednesday night from 1958 to 1971. 1 can of chili heated in a pot, a sleeve of saltine crackers on the side, a glass of water. That was church supper for 200 families sitting on metal folding chairs in a fellowship hall that smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. The chili came from a number 10 can that cost $1.89 and served 15 people. The crackers cost a dime. The women who ran that kitchen did not have a budget. They had a prayer. If you walked into a Piggly Wiggly in 1962, a can of Hormel chili cost 29 cents. You could feed your family of 4 for less than $1 and still bring enough for the church table. That was the math of survival. Not fancy, not proud, just fed. Born from necessity, buttermilk began as the liquid left behind after churning butter, a byproduct that rural households couldn't afford to waste. In its earliest form, this tangy drink was a natural result of fermenting milk in warm conditions, which gave it its signature tang and longer shelf life. Over time, it became a staple in kitchens around the world, from Indian lassi to Southern cornbread recipes. Buttermilk's real charm lies in its ability to transform recipes. Its acidity reacts with baking soda, creating carbon dioxide bubbles that give pancakes their fluffiness and biscuits their light, airy texture. And when it comes to fried chicken, buttermilk works its magic as a marinade, tenderizing the meat while adding just the right amount of tang. It's like a kitchen magician, turning everyday ingredients into showstoppers. For those living frugally, buttermilk was a gift that kept on giving. It was inexpensive, long-lasting, and adaptable. Even if you didn't have fresh buttermilk on hand, you could fake it by adding vinegar or lemon juice to regular milk, a trick that's still popular today. Nutritionally, buttermilk packs a punch. It's lower in fat than regular milk, high in probiotics, and easier to digest for those with mild lactose intolerance. Number 20. Egg drop soup. In 1943, a Japanese-American woman named Setsuko Hayashi in Stockton, California, made this for her children with nothing but water, eggs, and soy sauce. She had been released from an internment camp 6 months earlier and had almost nothing in her kitchen. She heated the water, whisked the eggs, and poured them slowly into the pot so they formed thin ribbons. A splash of soy sauce. That was dinner. It took 5 minutes. 2 eggs cost about 2 cents in the early 1940s. Egg drop soup had existed in Chinese cooking for centuries. But during the war years, American families of all backgrounds discovered that eggs and a pot of boiling water could feel like a real meal. It was not filling in the way a stew was filling. Still, it was protein, it was hot, and it kept you going until morning. Baked feta with honey and thyme might be a combination you aren't used to hearing, but it's one that will rock your world if you give it a fair shot. Feta cheese on its own is one of the most popular kinds of cheeses we have right now, especially if you go out for dining, so this kind of has an air of flashiness to it too. It has this salty intensity, but at the same time the cheese is so soft it melts like butter in your mouth, especially when it's baked, and it works so incredibly well with honey. I never personally thought cheese and honey could go together that well, but the saltiness of the feta combined with the sweetness of the honey make this wonderful contrast. Kinda like when you hear a sick guitar riff over a slow, tone-setting drum beat, you know what I mean? As far as toppings go, there's nothing better to wrap this dish up with than thyme, which gives that perfect cover to both flavors so that neither step on each other's toes. That first bite starts with hints of thyme, but quickly follows a lovely mix of everything the feta and honey have to offer. Number 13, ham loaf. Picture a meatloaf but built from the ends and trimmings of a ham that would otherwise have gone to waste, and you have the idea. Leftover cooked ham was ground up, mixed with a little fresh pork, bound with breadcrumbs and egg, then pressed into a pan and baked low and slow. Many cooks brushed it with a sweet glaze of brown sugar and mustard, so the outside turned sticky and the inside stayed tender. It made a few dollars of ham scraps look like a proper Sunday roast on the common table. Sliced thick, it fed a houseful and tasted even better cold the next day in a sandwich, which kept the leftovers earning their keep. It belonged to the great tradition of boarding house thrift, where nothing was thrown out and every scrap found a second purpose. Church suppers and family reunions carried it on for years after the boarding houses closed. Ham loaf turned the humblest leftovers into the centerpiece of the table, and that was no small trick. Number 22, Jell-O salad. 1 box of lime gelatin, 1 can of crushed pineapple, 1 cup of cottage cheese. Mixed together, poured into a mold, and chilled until it set into something that jiggled and shimmered under the fluorescent lights of every church basement in America. By 1955, Jell-O had become a status symbol for housewives who owned a refrigerator. The gelatin cost 10 cents a box. The pineapple cost 15. An entire Pentecostal congregation in Wheeling, West Virginia, ate Jell-O salad every 4th Sunday for a decade because Lois Prater brought a pan so large it barely fit through the fellowship hall door. She made it the night before and carried it in both arms like a sleeping child. This was not a side dish. This was an act of devotion from a woman who believed that feeding your church was the same as feeding your faith. Nobody made their own, they just waited for Lois. Number 9, skillet tamale pie. California ranch wives and Texas farm mothers in the 1930s built this one out of a Mexican idea and an iron pan. Brown a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion in a deep skillet. Stir in a can of stewed tomatoes, a can of whole kernel corn, a fistful of olives if you had a jar in the cellar, and a teaspoon of chili powder. Whisk up a quick cornmeal batter in a separate bowl with 1 egg and a cup of milk. Pour the batter right on top of the simmering meat. Lid on. 20 minutes on a low flame. The cornmeal puffed and set into a soft yellow crown. The recipe ran in Sunset magazine in 1942 and showed up in every junior league cookbook from San Diego to Tulsa by 1955. 1 pan to wash, 1 supper for a long table. Number 18, potato and onion skillet hash. 4 potatoes, 1 onion, bacon grease in the bottom of a cast iron skillet. Your mother sliced the potatoes thin so they cooked fast, laid them flat in the hot grease and pressed them down with a spatula, then left them alone long enough to brown before she turned them. The onions went in halfway through, softening and turning sweet against the crust that had formed on the potatoes. Salt, pepper. That was all it needed. One pan, one flame. Under a dime. Under a dime. Nothing wasted. In rural communities across Tennessee and Kentucky, fried potatoes and onions was the supper that appeared when there was nothing in the house but the potato sack and the onion bin. A pound of potatoes cost about 5 cents in 1964. The skillet was ready in 20 minutes. Everyone ate until the pan was clean. No stove required beyond a flame and patience. No pots to wash but one. Here's a sandwich that knew how to spice up Sunday supper. Soft white bread with a crunchy side of celery hearts, and deviled ham. Deviled ham is ham with an attitude, spiced, minced, and mixed with mayo or mustard for a creamy spread that's as packed a punch as it is. In the mid-20th century, canned deviled ham was a pantry staple, often sold in those tiny paper-wrapped tins. Salty, tangy, personality-loaded, it was spread thickly on bread and served with crisp celery hearts as a light, tasty meal. The celery wasn't for show, it was the perfect crunch to help balance the richness of the ham. It wasn't the kind of Sunday supper you spent hours cooking, but it was good. It was a little spicy, kids loved it, adults loved it because it was effortless, and everyone loved it because it was delicious. Deviled ham has pretty much faded into history, but its memory lives on in retro recipe books and maybe in your grandparents' memories. Number 16, funeral potatoes. Frozen hash browns, a can of cream of chicken soup, crushed cornflakes on top, baked until the cornflakes turned golden and the potatoes underneath melted into something warm and filling and impossibly comforting. The Relief Society of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints made this dish so often for grieving families that it earned its name from the occasion. By the 1950s, funeral potatoes had spread beyond Utah and Idaho into Methodist and Baptist churches across the Great Plains. A bag of frozen hash browns cost 39 cents in 1960. A can of soup cost 15 cents. A box of cornflakes cost a quarter. You could comfort an entire bereaved family for under 80 cents. That was the economics of grief in mid-century America. You could not fix the loss. You could not fill the empty chair. But you could fill the table, and for one evening, surrounded by the smell of something warm and familiar, that had to be enough. The dish earned its name honestly. Mayo, the creamy spread we know and love, has been around in some form since the 18th century, with its most common origin story tracing back to a Spanish chef creating a creamy sauce for a French nobleman. By the late 1800s, it made its way into American kitchens, where it soon became a culinary staple. Its commercial rise began in 1912, when the first mass-produced jar appeared, making it accessible to everyone, not just the elite. While it's often associated with sandwiches and potato salad, mayo does much more than add moisture. In baking, it serves as a secret weapon, making cakes incredibly moist by substituting butter or oil. This was especially helpful during times when ingredients were scarce or expensive. For frugal cooks, mayo was a versatile pantry item that could stretch $1. It was used not only as a spread, but also as a base for creamy dressings, dips, and sauces. Though high in fat, mayo is a good source of vitamin E and healthy fats. For those concerned with nutrition, lighter versions or alternatives like avocado mayo have made the spread a bit healthier while keeping its creamy, comforting texture intact. Number 24, cornmeal mush. If your grandmother grew up poor, she probably called this breakfast. In homes across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the Deep South, cornmeal mush was the first thing a child learned to eat and the last thing a widow gave up. Cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. Families stirred it on the stove until it thickened and ate it hot with whatever they had. Molasses, a pat of butter, bacon drippings. If there were leftovers, the mush went into a loaf pan, let it set overnight, sliced it in the morning, and fried it in lard until the edges went crisp and golden. In 1936, Cornmeal cost about 15 cents for a 5-pound bag. That bag could feed a family for a week. Clara Canucciari, who later became famous for her depression cooking videos at age 93, remembered eating this as a girl in Chicago. She said nobody thought about what they were missing. They were just glad to have something hot. Now, when it comes to dieting, some people like whole wheat instead of the usual, and for them, I have another skillet-based meal. Whole wheat no-knead skillet bread is exactly the sweet deal that it sounds like. Throw out everything you know about bread making because I'm about to actually blow your mind. You take whole wheat flour, yeast, and water, and that's it. You don't need to knead this bread at all. It just leaves on its own and rises perfectly, thanks to the whole wheat flour providing a nutty and reliable base for the bread. It takes just 3 things to make this loaf, but it's the perfect way to get bread on a lazy day when you don't feel like going all out or getting up and going to the nearest store just for bread. Also, sometimes you just don't have the ingredients to make a good loaf of bread, and in times like that, this is a way better alternative. This kind of bread started mostly in rural areas and in neighborhoods with a bit of a lower average income during economically stressful times, but it's because people coped in such innovative ways that we have lifesavers like this today. Number 14. Chicken and dumplings. A whole chicken simmered in water. Flour and shortening, and a little milk formed into dumplings and dropped into the broth. 3 ingredients if you counted the chicken, the dumpling dough, and the water. Churchwomen counted it that way because churchwomen counted everything the way that made the most sense to the budget. A whole chicken cost $1.49 a pound in 1985, but the backs, necks, and wings cost almost nothing. A senior church lady could buy $2 worth of bony parts and make a pot that served 15. The dumplings puffed up soft and pillowy, absorbing every drop of chicken flavor as they cooked. This was the dish that Southern churches served when someone in the congregation was grieving, sick, or just worn thin by life. They brought it to doorsteps in covered pots. They left it on porches without knocking. For a widow eating alone at a table that used to seat 4, reheating a bowl of chicken and dumplings made the kitchen smell like someone still cared. That was the whole point. Not the recipe, the caring. The economics of compassion are simple. A pot of chicken and dumplings cost less than $3 and told a grieving person they were not forgotten. No greeting card in the world could do that. It had to be made by hand, by a woman who knew your name. That was the price of comfort. $3 and someone who remembered you existed. Chicken fried rice with canned chicken delivered a satisfying stir-fry that used pantry staples to create takeout flavor in record time. Day-old rice separated beautifully in a hot skillet coated with a thin film of oil, each grain absorbing the smoky heat. Diced onions, carrots, and peas added color and sweetness, sizzling as they released their fragrance. A can of cooked chicken provided tender meat with no extra prep, breaking apart into savory shreds that mingled with the vegetables. A quick splash of soy sauce and a sprinkle of garlic powder tied everything together, while scrambled eggs folded in at the end brought richness and body. The result was a meal that tasted carefully crafted yet came together in less than 15 minutes, perfect for evenings when energy ran low but appetites ran high. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of protein across several generous portions while clearing the fridge of leftover rice. Each spoonful offered the comfort of home and the excitement of a restaurant favorite, a reminder that great flavor does not require a long list of fresh ingredients when skill and heat meet simple planning. Number 20. Egg drop soup. Depression style. Not the Chinese restaurant version with cornstarch and sesame oil. This was something different entirely. A woman in rural Alabama or the Ozark communities of Missouri browned sliced potatoes and onions in a little lard, added water to fill the pot, seasoned with salt and a bay leaf, and when the broth was rolling, she cracked 2 eggs directly into the pot and stirred fast. The eggs broke into long golden ribbons through the hot broth. It was protein without the cost of meat. Eggs averaged 53 cents a dozen in 1965. For a family of 4, 2 eggs in a pot of broth and potatoes was a full supper for under 20 cents. Nobody called it egg drop soup. It's a simple and beautiful piece of ingenuity. They called it potato broth, or just the egg soup. The name was not important. Getting everyone fed before dark was. Number 14. Chicken and dumplings. A whole chicken simmered in water. Flour and shortening, and a little milk formed into dumplings and dropped into the broth. 3 ingredients if you counted the chicken, the dumpling dough, and the water. Churchwomen counted it that way because churchwomen counted everything the way that made the most sense to the budget. A whole chicken cost $1.49 a pound in 1985, but the backs, necks, and wings cost almost nothing. A senior church lady could buy $2 worth of bony parts and make a pot that served 15. The dumplings puffed up soft and pillowy, absorbing every drop of chicken flavor as they cooked. This was the dish that Southern churches served when someone in the congregation was grieving, sick, or just worn thin by life. They brought it to doorsteps in covered pots. They left it on porches without knocking. For a widow eating alone at a table that used to seat 4, reheating a bowl of chicken and dumplings made the kitchen smell like someone still cared. That was the whole point. Not the recipe, the caring. The economics of compassion are simple. A pot of chicken and dumplings cost less than $3 and told a grieving person they were not forgotten. No greeting card in the world could do that. It had to be made by hand, by a woman who knew your name. That was the price of comfort. $3 and someone who remembered you existed. Worcestershire sauce, with its bold and complex flavor, has an intriguing backstory that dates back to the early 19th century. It was created by 2 chemists, John Wheely Lee and William Perrins, in England, who originally set out to replicate a recipe they had encountered in India. After some trial and error, they produced the sauce, which became an instant hit in England. By the late 1800s, it made its way across the Atlantic, where it quickly found a home in American kitchens. This dark, tangy sauce is known for its ability to enhance meats, stews, and sauces with its deep, umami-rich flavor. A dash can elevate a pot roast, a burger, or even a simple bowl of soup. It adds complexity, rounding out the flavors with a perfect balance of tang, sweetness, and spice. In terms of frugality, Worcestershire sauce is a powerhouse. A little goes a long way, making it a valuable addition to any kitchen. For those looking to stretch their ingredients, it can turn inexpensive cuts of meat into something savory and luxurious. Though it's not a health food per se, Worcestershire sauce contains a mix of fermented ingredients that offer probiotic benefits. Number 23. Sugar bread. This was dessert in homes where dessert did not exist. A slice of bread, a smear of butter or lard, a spoonful of sugar on top. That was it. Children in textile mill towns across the Carolinas ate this after supper and thought it was a treat. Mothers in the Dust Bowl handed it to their kids and called it cake. In families where even butter was a luxury, they used bacon grease instead and still sprinkled the sugar. Sugar was about 6 cents a pound in 1933. A woman in Gastonia, North Carolina, remembered her mother making sugar bread every Friday night during the Depression. She said it felt like a celebration even though there was nothing to celebrate. That small sweetness at the end of a hard day mattered more than it should have. Here's another banana banger you may not be too familiar with. But don't worry, I'm here to get you acquainted with all the things that are in right now when it comes to the food world. Baked banana chips are these amazingly intense caramelized sweet chips that have the perfect amount of tang and crunch, making them the perfect thing to snack on while you chat away or just as a way to up your fruit game a little bit. The acidity of the lemon juice here really helps the sweetness not be overwhelming, and the salt also works kind of to the same effect. You may not be expecting this, but it actually helps to amplify the flavors of the banana itself. As for the chips themselves, they taste heavily of banana but also have these honey-like aftertastes, which make them addictive and keep you coming back for more and more. The best thing about stuff like this is that it's really out there for people with a sweet tooth. You get tired of the same rotation of ice cream, sodas, and other basic desserts. Sometimes you want a new experimental dish that takes new concepts and puts them up in interesting ways too, just like all the fans of savory get to enjoy regularly. Number 24. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Meat was a luxury in a house full of boarders, so the smart cook learned to make a little go a long way. Dried salted beef was shaved paper thin, soaked to pull out some of the salt, then folded into a thick white sauce and spooned over toasted bread. A few cents of dried beef could feed the whole table, and the milk gravy did the rest of the work. Soldiers ate so much of it in 2 world wars that they gave it a barracks nickname too crude to repeat here. But back at the boarding house, it was simply supper on a tight week. It was salty, warm, and stuck to your ribs, exactly what a tired worker wanted on a cold night. You can still find the little jars of dried beef if you hunt, but almost nobody reaches for them anymore. Creamed chipped beef was thrift you could taste, and it kept countless tables fed when the meat money ran low. Number 13, beans and weenies. A can of pork and beans, a handful of hot dogs sliced thin, a squirt of yellow mustard, a tablespoon of brown sugar, and sometimes a strip or two of bacon laid across the top. Into a pot or a baking dish at 350 for half an hour. That was supper in working-class households from New England to the Pacific Northwest every Saturday night for 30 years. In Boston and Portland, Maine, this tradition ran deep enough that Saturday was simply called Frank and Bean Night in many households. Van Camp's pork and beans sold for 21 cents a can in 1961. A package of 8 hot dogs was 29 cents. 6 people could eat for under 60 cents. Your father called it a good supper. Your mother called it Saturday. It was both. And it wasn't fancy. It didn't try to be. And on Sunday, if there were leftovers, you ate them cold on white bread with yellow mustard, and nobody complained. Number 22, Jell-O salad. 1 box of lime gelatin, 1 can of crushed pineapple, 1 cup of cottage cheese. Mixed together, poured into a mold, and chilled until it set into something that jiggled and shimmered under the fluorescent lights of every church basement in America. By 1955, Jell-O had become a status symbol for housewives who owned a refrigerator. The gelatin cost 10 cents a box. The pineapple cost 15. An entire Pentecostal congregation in Wheeling, West Virginia, ate Jell-O salad every 4th Sunday for a decade because Lois Prater brought a pan so large it barely fit through the fellowship hall door. She made it the night before and carried it in both arms like a sleeping child. This was not a side dish. This was an act of devotion from a woman who believed that feeding your church was the same as feeding your faith. Nobody made their own. They just waited for Lois. Bay leaves have been a kitchen staple for centuries, tracing their origins to the ancient Mediterranean, where they were used not just for cooking but for medicinal and ceremonial purposes. The Romans even crowned their victorious generals with bay leaf wreaths, a symbol of honor and triumph. Over time, bay leaves made their way into European and eventually American cooking, prized for their ability to add a subtle depth of flavor to long-simmering dishes. While bay leaves are rarely the star of a dish, their ability to deepen flavors without overpowering them is unmatched. A single leaf added to a pot of soup or stew infuses it with a delicate aromatic quality that enhances the overall flavor profile. In sauces, the leaf works quietly behind the scenes, creating a balance that makes everything come together beautifully. In frugal kitchens, bay leaves were a secret weapon, adding complexity to otherwise simple recipes. In the days before exotic spices were easily accessible, bay leaves were a cost-effective way to elevate a dish without breaking the bank. Interestingly, bay leaves also have medicinal properties. They contain antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, which were once used to treat digestive issues and headaches. Number 12, buttered egg noodles. Egg noodles, butter, salt. That is the whole recipe. You boiled the noodles, drained them, dropped in a lump of butter, and tossed it all together. In the 1950s, mothers who had nothing else in the pantry put this on the table and watched their children eat it like it was the best thing they had ever tasted. A bag of egg noodles cost about 20 cents. A stick of butter cost around 15 cents. For 35 cents total, you could feed 3 or 4 people. It was not exciting. It was not pretty. It was warm and filling, and it took less than 10 minutes. Children who grew up on buttered noodles did not know their families were struggling. They just knew they liked dinner. Years later, when those same children had money and options, many of them still made buttered egg noodles on the nights when nothing else felt right. You've all heard of jalapeno poppers, so I don't really need to introduce them, but a lot of you may not be too familiar with how they're actually made. See, you hear the description of them and you immediately think, yeah, this is above my pay grade. I wouldn't blame you. It sounds like a lot of prep work after all, doesn't it? You gotta scoop out the jalapeno and empty it, then you have to make this delicate stuffing and get it all in there too. While I wouldn't be surprised if the technical part threw you off just a bit, it's nothing that should stop you from taking full advantage of this format. Jalapeno peppers. Just take cream cheese or cheddar and then some bacon. While people consider bacon to be optional, let's be honest, what's spice without some good meat? Exactly. Plus, the bacon works so well with the exterior of the peppers. Also, if you're feeling extra freaky, you could always leave a few jalapeno seeds in there when you're scooping it out to amp up the spiciness 10 times more. It really helps, not just with your health or as an affordable meal, but also as a mood booster. You know, spices help us be happier because they release endorphins? Just another reason to start investing in some greener, cleaner, and natural sources of food. Number 25, the boiled dinner. Ask anyone who paid $4 a week for room and board, and this was the meal that turned up most. A piece of cheap, salted beef went into one big pot with cabbage, carrots, turnips, and potatoes, and it simmered most of the afternoon while the landlady did everything else. It cost almost nothing and stretched to feed a dozen working men with seconds left over. The genius was in the leftovers. Whatever beef and vegetables did not get eaten at supper got chopped fine and fried into a hash for the next morning. So a single piece of meat did double duty across 2 meals. Nobody called it fancy. It was honest food, the kind that filled you up after a 10-hour shift and asked for nothing in return. Today, most folks would not know how to start one because the cut of beef it needs has all but vanished from the meat case. That is a shame because the boiled dinner fed more Americans than almost anything else on this list. Number 13, green bean casserole. 2 cans of green beans, 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, a handful of French fried onions on top. Baked at 350 for 25 minutes. This recipe was invented in 1955 by Dorcas Riley at the Campbell Soup Company test kitchen in Camden, New Jersey. She created it for the Associated Press, and within 5 years it had migrated from holiday tables to church fellowship halls across the country. By 1965, you could not walk into a covered dish supper without seeing at least 2 pans of green bean casserole on the table. The canned beans cost 10 cents each. The soup cost 15 cents. The fried onions cost a quarter. An entire casserole that served 8 people cost 60 cents. Dorcas Riley never made a penny from the recipe. She gave it away for free, the same way church women gave away their time and their cooking. When she died in 2018, the New York Times ran her obituary. The headline mentioned the casserole. That was how the world remembered her. Not a bad legacy for 60 cents worth of canned goods. Number 11, Frito Pie Skillet. The Frito-Lay publicity team served Frito's chili pie to the Dallas Dietetic Association in 1949, and the recipe ran on millions of red and yellow bags in 1962. Heat a can of chili, pour it over a pile of corn chips, top with grated cheese and chopped onion. By the late 60s, working mothers in Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma were making the skillet version on weeknights when nothing else was thawed. Brown a half pound of ground beef in her seasoned pan. Stir in a can of pinto beans and a small can of tomato sauce with a shake of chili powder. Pile a bag of Fritos right on top of the simmering chili. Cover with a fistful of shredded cheddar. Lid on for 2 minutes to melt the cheese. Spoon it straight from the pan onto 5 plates. Number 24, cornmeal mush with milk. A pot of water, a cup of cornmeal, a pinch of salt. Stir it until it thickened. Pour it into a bowl with warm milk over the top and a thread of sorghum if you had it. That was supper. In farm communities across southern Indiana and the hill country of southern Ohio, cornmeal mush appeared on the table 3 or 4 nights a week in lean seasons. A pound of yellow cornmeal cost 8 cents in 1963. A family of 5 could eat for under a dime. What most people do not know is that leftover mush was sliced cold the next morning, fried crispy in the same skillet it was cooked in, and eaten with syrup for breakfast. Nothing was wasted. The pot was rinsed, not scrubbed. The cornmeal cooked right down to the bottom would flavor the next batch. That was the whole recipe, and it stretched across 2 meals. Number 10, potato soup. 5 potatoes, a splash of milk, a tablespoon of butter, peeled, diced, simmered until soft, then mashed right in the pot until the broth turned thick and creamy. That was the entire recipe that fed more church basements and fellowship halls than any other soup on this list. A 10-pound bag of potatoes cost 53 cents in 1955, and 1 bag made enough soup to last a week. For a church kitchen feeding 30 people on a Wednesday night, 2 bags of potatoes and a gallon of milk produced enough soup to fill every bowl twice. Edna Caldwell ran the Wednesday night kitchen at First Baptist Church in Harlan, Kentucky, from 1954 to 1972. She made potato soup 40 weeks out of every year. The other 12 weeks she made bean soup. She told the deacons the Lord provided potatoes and beans, and she was not in a position to question his menu. During hard times, nothing went to waste in the kitchen, especially bacon grease. Every drop of that rendered fat was collected in jars, tucked near the stove for easy access. This practice was a culinary tradition rooted in the resourcefulness of past generations. From the rural South to urban kitchens during World War II, bacon grease was a lifeline for flavor in dishes that might otherwise fall flat. What makes it so special was its smoky, savory richness adds depth that butter or oil can't quite replicate. Whether used to fry eggs, saute vegetables, or as a base for gravies, bacon grease is the secret behind countless dishes that just taste like home. And for cornbread lovers, greasing the skillet with bacon fat is practically non-negotiable. Economically, bacon grease was a goldmine in disguise. Bacon was already a kitchen staple, so saving the fat turned one ingredient into 2. It could stretch meals and enhance flavors without spending a single extra cent. A frugal cook's dream. Surprisingly, bacon grease isn't as unhealthy as you might think. It's high in monounsaturated fats, which are better for heart health than trans fats found in margarine. Number 16, mayonnaise sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a thick spread of mayonnaise, nothing else. In the 1930s and 1940s, this was lunch in thousands of American homes where there was no meat, no cheese, and no leftovers. A jar of mayonnaise cost about 15 cents and lasted 2 weeks. It gave plain bread a richness that butter could not match. Children grew up eating mayonnaise sandwiches without realizing they were eating a poverty meal. To them, it was just lunch. A man who grew up in rural Alabama in the 1940s said he ate a mayonnaise sandwich every day of 2nd grade. He did not think of it as going without. He thought of it as what everybody ate. It sounds like almost nothing. For a generation that measured a meal by whether it stopped the hunger, it was enough. Let's get started. The entire premise of this roller coaster is that these dishes barely take anything from you, any money, time, or effort. With just a little bit of the work, you can make stuff like baked egg cups and get 3 times the value for your money you otherwise would. After all, instead of those curries, stews, and pizzas, this just takes 3 whole ingredients. Everything you'll find on this list is built conveniently like that, and it tastes pretty good despite the minimal effort. Here you can expect a flavorful combination of eggs layered upon bacon, a combo I know you don't want to miss at the family table. How does something like that feel when you bake it with some cheese? What does the dish start to look like if you substitute one of those core 3 ingredients? That's the beauty of these dishes. They can be anything you'd like them to be. You just need to trust in your vision. Plus, every doctor tells you over and over that you need more eggs in your diet, and it's like, okay, I get it, but that doesn't make eating them any more fun. On the flip side, all the best coaches and trainers will tell you that enjoying what you eat is the most important part of keeping a diet. Personally, I'm starting to see where their rhetoric is coming from. This is definitely better than boiled eggs. Number 9. Codfish cakes. Salt cod was once one of the cheapest things a coastal cook could buy, dried stiff as a board and keeping for months without ice. The landlady soaked a piece overnight to draw out the salt, then flaked it and mashed it together with boiled potato, an egg, and a little onion. She shaped the mix into patties and fried them golden in a hot skillet until the edges crisped. A small piece of preserved fish stretched into a platter that fed the whole table, which made it a blessing on Friday nights when Catholic boarders kept to meatless meals. By the 1920s, factories in Gloucester were canning the things by the tens of thousands a day, an early convenience food for busy kitchens. The homemade version, fried fresh and served with a squeeze of lemon, was far better than anything from a tin. Codfish cakes fed thrifty coastal tables for generations, then quietly slipped off the supper menu for good. Number 21. Cornbread salad. Crumbled cornbread, canned pinto beans, diced raw onion, layered in a bowl, dressed with nothing but the bean liquid, and served cold. In Alabama and Mississippi, this was the church supper women brought when the kitchen was too hot to turn on the oven. No cooking required. Just yesterday's leftover cornbread turned into tomorrow's potluck offering. A box of Jiffy cornbread mix cost 12 cents in 1968. A can of pinto beans cost 15 cents. The onion came from the garden or cost a penny at the roadside stand. Ida Mae Thompson in Meridian, Mississippi, brought this to Mount Zion Baptist Church every June for 22 years. She told the ladies' circle that cold cornbread salad was the only recipe the Lord gave her, and she was not going to argue with the Lord. The bowl came back clean every time. 60 suppers, 3 ingredients or less, and every single one of them came from a kitchen where wasting food wasn't an option. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments what your grandmother made with almost nothing, because somebody watching right now probably grew up eating the exact same thing and never knew it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And when you're done here, we've got 60 forgotten ground beef recipes from the 1970s waiting for you. Thanks for watching.